Hello, and welcome to Materials Unlocked, the podcast where we take a look at the lesser-known subject of material science and try to unlock its mysteries. My name is Dr. Lewis Owen, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Sheffield. In each episode, with the help of some students, friends and colleagues, we're going to delve into a particular topic and hopefully unlock its potential. This episode is a little bit different. It's one of two specials that we wanted to put out to accompany the main series of programmes. One of the things that we've been talking about throughout the series so far is thinking about people's backgrounds and how they got into materials and discovered material science. So today we wanted to take a bit of a head-on look at this and talk about materials, and particularly how material science is taught at school and university, and possibly that transition between school and university. As always, I'm joined in the room by one of our current students. And so far, all the students that we've been talking to have been postgraduate research students, people doing PhDs. But today we're joined by one of our undergraduate students, Annabelle Lau. Annabelle, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Annabelle, you're a fourth-year master's student.
Yes,
Is that right?
Yes, correct.
So, and how's that going so far?
It's going well. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm just excited to graduate, really, because I've been here for 5 years. So I did a foundation year as well on top of my 4 years master's.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, we can talk a bit more about that. And I believe at the moment you're in the middle of exam preparation. Is that right?
I'm in the middle of exam preparation, but this is a really nice break from really being in silent study in the library.
I was going to say, get outside, see some sky and some fresh air.
Exactly.
How is the revision going?
It's going well. Yeah. Lots of things to do.
Always, yeah.
I'm enjoying it regardless.
That's good. I remember when I was, doing in preparation for the exams, the library always felt like a very tense atmosphere.
Oh,
yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure that hasn't changed and is still the case. So you're a fourth year. You're on the master's program.
Yes,
and you're currently in the fourth year master's. You do a research project.
Yes,
is that right?
I do.
So could you tell us a little bit about the research project you're doing at the moment?
I can. So I'm currently working with a company with my final year research project, and I'm looking at microstructural transformations in a biomedical alloy that's used in hip implants and knee implants.
Oh, okay.
So basically looking at how this material will change during processing, which will impact the final mechanical properties, and hopefully we improve patient life by doing so.
Yeah. So I suppose then you've got to have a bit of an understanding of both, the materials itself, but also a bit of an understanding of the environment that it's going into and the requirements that are needed, which are probably slightly different from, some of the other requirements that we might more commonly deal with in metallic systems, because very often we're thinking about high temperatures and things, but in the body, I suppose we're thinking about a completely different set of requirements.
Yeah. So a whole load of solvents in your body that are attacking, these metals or these implants, because obviously they're foreign objects. So trying to make these implants ideally wear resistant, so there are no particles going into the bloodstream, and we improve patient life because they're in less pain as well.
Yeah.
But also these implants will hopefully last for a longer amount of time, so less operations are needed, which will obviously save money, save patients going into hospital all the time, things like that.
Yeah.
So we're just working towards improving these metals to help everyone, really.
Yeah, that's fascinating. How are you finding your first sort of exploration in research? Because I suppose this is the first time you've really had a sort of, a project to sort of dig your teeth into with that sort of research aspect. Unless, I don't know if you've done placements or anything before where you've done similar projects?
Yes, so I did a summer placement with this company, which is a part of the degree, actually. It's a whole module to find placement with the company. And I loved it so much that I wanted to do it as a final year project. Oh, so
it's the same company that you're working with?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Right.
So I really wanted to continue the work that I was doing over summer. And luckily that they were very enthusiastic about it. And now I'm able to do it for a full year, which is amazing. And I'm able to get more in depth and more confident in my own research and lab skills as well.
Yeah.
I'm constantly in the lab at the moment and doing my own experiments, but I think that's really exciting because I've never really done that before. Taking control of a full project from start to finish.
Yeah.
because, we have labs at university, but those are set out for us.
Yep.
There's a mandated way that we need to do things, whereas this is completely experimental. Things have already gone wrong, but that is research.
That is research. Everything goes wrong.
Yeah, it's just learning how to adapt to that. And then that will help me further on in life. And, it's these little skills that I wouldn't have come across if I wasn't doing a STEM-based degree.
Yeah. So do you think research is the way you want to go at the moment? I know these things often change from they can change from day to day sometimes. But
I don't really know.
That's fair enough. Yep.
Research I love, but I do love working with customers and things like that, delivering customer care packages and things like that. So it might be something that I come back to in the future.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. Never know. So how did you come across material science? Did you do any materials at school, or was it a sort of leap into the unknown when you went to university?
The only thing I remember at school is during GCSEs, we did the stress and strain curve.
Ah, yes, a classic stress strain curve, yeah.
And we did an experiment on some copper wire to make our own stress and strain curve. But aside from that, that's the only thing. So I grew up with my dad being an engineer.
Right, okay.
And my brother went into mechanical engineering.
Okay, so sciencey family.
Yeah, but I thought I wanted to go into languages because I took Italian A-level.
Oh, right.
So I was sort of exploring two different avenues of degrees, but I never heard of material science until I'd come to Open Days. It was always, the standard mechanical, electrical, things like that. But I actually came to Sheffield and it was the first time I'd seen it. It was next to biomaterials, I remember.
Right.
And I felt that it sort of hit all the markers of the physics that I was loving and the maths and everything like that. And to me, it seemed more interesting than mechanical. There was a wide range of topics that I could explore, and I could use a bit of chemistry, a bit of biology, a bit of physics, a bit of maths. And it was so lab-based that I wanted to be hands-on. And that's what I think drew me towards material science and engineering. I wasn't going to be at a computer, doing code for every day and things like that. So yeah, that's really the only way that I got exposed to material science and engineering was over days.
The A-levels that you were doing, you mentioned Italian, and then was it physics and maths as well? Right, okay. Yeah. And did you have another one for AS, or did you do three?
I only did three, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think actually it's a good point now for us to bring in our other guest on today's show. Joining us remotely, we have Beverly Maloney. Beverly is a teacher from the Royal Hospital School in Holbrook near Ipswich, where I believe she is the STEM lead and a teacher in design and technology. So Beverly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
One thing I wanted to say, so the way I was introduced to Beverly or came across Beverly, we were both at a dinner. I'm going to embarrass Beverly now. We were both at a dinner from the IOM3, which is the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining, which is one of the national bodies like the Royal Society of Chemistry or Institute of Physics, and it's a national body for materials research in the UK. And the reason I came across Beverly was awarded this year the Sir Colin Humphreys Education Award, which is an award that's given every year recognising the contribution to teaching of STEM and particularly teaching of material science at schools. So I thought Beverly would be a fantastic person to talk to about this. And I think Beverly is quite interesting because you're approaching this possibly from a slightly different angle because you teach design and technology.
Yes,
so you come at this much more from a sort of practical side.
In theory, well, ironically, in theory, yes. But we also go over quite a lot of the understanding of material properties and characteristics. So we understand it from how a material might react as opposed to why it might react to something. So yeah, it's good fun. I get to do very experimental things in the workshop, which is great. Which I never got to do when I was at school. Which
I was going to say, could you tell us a bit about your own sort of school background and history? How did you end up where you are?
So a little bit like Annabelle, actually. I went to an all-girls convent school and I really loved being in the workshop. I really loved just handling things and just getting on with it. I was kind of the set to girl. I never quite was up there, but I understood what was going on. I didn't really have the words to articulate why those things were going on. And then I chose my A-levels and wasn't able to do design technology at A-level. Essentially,
was that because the school didn't offer it, or?
I had a fantastic design technology teacher who really, really worked hard at trying to get us to do the A-level.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was probably a sign of the times. It was an all-girls convent school. We were told that girls don't do that. And so I ended up doing biology instead. So I did physics, maths, geography, biology, and good old general studies when it was around.
Right.
So 5 A-levels, yeah. And absolutely fell in love with maths and the physics. And my design technology teacher just went, well, if you can't do the A-level, then let's get you doing some engineering education scheme. So I ended up working for Ford for a little bit. We designed a prototype for people with the inability to use the lower limbs in a car, which was fantastic. So it was very proactive and very engaging. And then I decided that I wanted to continue with engineering at degree level. Applied for degrees within London. Ended up doing mechanical engineering at UCL for a couple of years. Really loved the materials science elements in the course. Absolutely hated the engineering maths. Just couldn't do it at all. And then realised along the way that it perhaps wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. So had I realised a little bit sooner, like Annabelle, applying for university, then perhaps I would, thinking in hindsight now, I think I probably would have gone into material science. But I didn't have the kind of know-how from my teachers at that point. And then went to study design technology as a teaching degree at Goldsmiths in the end, and absolutely love it.
It's an incredible story, and all credit to you for finding these opportunities, particularly this opportunity with Ford and things, and doing that outside your school and study is stressful enough, let alone adding extra things on top of it. And it's such a shame that at the time you weren't encouraged and supported to do DT at university. And hopefully things are starting to change and there is more encouragement for people towards, STEM subjects, particularly from different backgrounds and different groups.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've been teaching for nearly 20 years, and over the course of the years, particularly in the last 10 years, it's just risen massively. STEM is recognised now as a thing. People aren't always going to be just scientists or just mathematicians, but actually the use of the four specialist areas can exist in everything. It doesn't have to exist in, as a scientist or a mathematician. It can exist in artifacts in history and, that kind of thing. Yeah. So it can be everywhere. And that to me is really, really important. My older brother is a mechanical engineer, and I kind of took the lead from him. Neither of my parents went to university. My mum was a nurse, and my dad was an accountant. So they kind of, my older brother was the one that had the influence on me, and he was always just fixing things and just working stuff out. And being a school teacher now makes me think, actually, there's material science is fascinating, but it can really grow from something quite simple. Yep. When we're kids, I've got 2 boys of my own, and the one thing they absolutely love is just being in the garden and digging stuff up and just being curious. And as children, we are all very curious. And somewhere along the line, it kind of gets drummed into us that we've got to learn this for our exams in order to move to the next step. But actually, that curiosity, I'm really keen on building upon so that so we can find new things. I mean, essentially, that's how the world has evolved, right?
Yeah. I mean, I still feel as a researcher that I feel incredibly lucky in my job that I get to explore that curiosity and sort of, go, oh, I wonder what would happen if we did this. And sort of, I feel like I'm playing most of the time. It's like, I wonder what that does.
That's essentially how I feel. When I received the award at the IM3, I genuinely felt like an imposter. I thought, all I'm doing is playing. I've I heard everyone receiving awards for fascinating things that they were doing, and I was in awe. And then I come up, and I think I said this in the speech. I can't actually remember everything I said in the speech, but I think I said I feel like I've just played around with concrete and resin, and it's in comparison, it's so little, but actually the essence of just playing around with stuff is so incredibly important, and realizing that it's okay to get it wrong, because actually a lot of the time when things go wrong, that 2 steps back makes you go 1 step forward sometimes, or the other way around, and you end up finding something new. So rum, I think, was found from whiskey sitting there for a little bit too long,
Oh, right.
yeah, something like that. So yeah, so I just think that there's real scope for exploration within materials. Unfortunately, not all of the time schools have the capacity to educate in that way.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things I wanted to talk about, was the fact that my understanding is that for a lot of people who have materials at school, it might be just within physics very often as a single module in the A level, if people do carry on to physics A level. And very often then it's a stress strain curve, as Annabelle described earlier. I think you said you did it at GCSE rather than at A level, but it's something very sort of not necessarily particularly involved. And while, don't get me wrong, stress strain curves are incredibly useful, I don't think they're necessarily the most captivating and exciting thing that sort of pulls you into the subject. And as you say, capturing that curiosity and enthusiasm is so important. I've always sort of maintained that the reason that most people end up in the sort of subject that they eventually study at university or whatever is because somewhere along the line someone said something to them that sparked a sort of a question in their mind, and that might be a teacher, it might be a program they watched, an article they read, something, but it suddenly it launched them on this sort of, well, what does that mean? What if? And and building that natural curiosity in. So you mentioned earlier, Beverly, you've done these experiments with concrete and epoxy. I wanted to see if you could just tell us a bit about those and the sort of things that you were doing at school teaching.
Again, it probably doesn't sound very fancy at all, talking to specialists in materials. But at GCSE, we do Design Technology NEA, which is a project that they embark on, which is worth 50% of their overall GCSE. And a lot of the NEA is based around development. And so there's an opportunity there really for pupils to try stuff out to see whether it works and then get marks for it, which is great. And if you utilise that development section in the right way, then you can get fascinating results. So we've worked a little bit with how concrete can be reinforced, particularly, but how it's changing the different quantities of the cement or the water, or adding some polymer beads in, that kind of thing, to change the weight. So we've got pupils making simple things like chairs out of concrete, but in a slightly different way. So, reinforcing and adding bits and pieces to it. We've introduced a resin project in year 8, which as a material can be quite expensive for lots of schools. We're very lucky to have that resource within the school. And we started trialling it out with GCSE, and then we kind of slowly brought it down to year kind of 8 level. So that's pretty good. And then next year, I think we'll be building it into year 7. So the earlier we do it, the better. And then with my year 12s the other day, I was covering biopolymers with them.
Oh,
it's a very dry subject if you don't actually get it out. So I used to consult within the Connecting STEM Teachers programme at the Royal Academy of Engineering, and one of the resources that they produced, because they produce lots of resources for lots of STEM teachers across the country, one of the resources was based on bioplastics. And my role within the consultancy was to go around to other teachers around the area and to introduce this resource. And I did this with lots of teachers about a year or so back. And I had the resource still sitting in my cupboard. And I thought, no, I'm going to get this resource out and I'm going to play around with this. So we had things like, agar-agar, gelatin and glycerol and cornstarch, nothing kind of out of the ordinary. But I said, right, okay, here we go. Let's heat some things up. Let's mix some things up. Let's leave it. Let's put it in some warm rooms, some cold rooms, and our workshops are absolutely freezing. So we had a real interesting discussion about material properties and characteristics in general, but they kind of took the foil off and they were feeling it. They were throwing it across the room and in obviously a sensible and health and safety manner. But
of course.
But it's but it just really captured, these 15, 16, 17-year-olds. It took half a lesson. And I think if those resources were there and available to use, like the Royal Academy of Engineering introduced, then I think it's just you've just got to get the right moment and the right kids and get it out there. So I really hope that, like you say, that it perhaps only takes that one thing from that one teacher that one time. Hopefully one of those year 12s are going to remember that.
Yes, yeah. And I think one of the, it sounds like it was a fantastic resource, and all credit to you. And I think, to pick up on one of the things that you mentioned, a lot of these things, as you say, you can do a lot with just things that are around you. I think that's, it can be opened up and made so accessible to so many different people, because even more so than, some other subjects. I mean, if we think of something like mechanical engineering or automotive engineering, people are aware that there is a car there, but they're not necessarily always going to take it apart and look into it and things. But materials are constantly all around us, everywhere we look. And we have chosen particular materials for our phones, our laptops, for writing, for pens or whatever, for a particular reason. And so there's so much opportunity to get people involved just by looking at what's around them and coming up with experiments and things that you can do with as you say, even some fairly simple materials that you can find potentially in your kitchen cupboard. And something like concrete, I think, is a fantastic example, because concrete, our world uses so much concrete, and one of the areas of research that's going on even within this university are thinking about cements and concretes and how we can make them greener and more sustainable. Because if you can make even small changes, because the use across the world is so vast, actually the carbon dioxide saving and things that you make is vast. So getting people to appreciate and understand these things at that very early level, I just think it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic.
That's essentially all it takes. There's a child within us all, and we just need to just play with things. That's even the person who doesn't like playing with things. You give them something that they are interested in, they will play with it. Not necessarily with their hands, but with their mind, and they'll read through it. And that's, in hindsight, I probably would have done all right as a material scientist. But actually, I feel really privileged to be in a position where, particularly in this school that I'm in, where I can share that with younger people from year 7 onwards, and capturing that kind of that curiosity.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. And then sort of picking up on that, Annabelle, coming to university then, we've already talked a bit about your research project and the practicals and things, but I think with a lot of, choices of STEM subjects, one of the things that people are often wondering are how much theoretical versus practical, and do they get that hands-on opportunity? Do they still get the opportunity to play at university? So could you tell us a bit about your course all the way through, and some of the practical things that you've done and how you found it, and possibly the division between theoretical stuff, practical stuff, and that side of things?
It's definitely a very good balance at university. So we obviously learn about the theoretical side in lectures, lecture notes, things like that. But then, especially in the first 2 years at university, you really get to apply that theoretical knowledge in the labs and to see it happening I think you're able to create that link between theoretical and real life. So an example would be, testing carbon fibers in a tensile machine. Seeing that obviously as a picture on a screen, or thinking about the fibers breaking, which direction specifically, but then being able to put it in a tensile tester, you doing it yourself, you thinking about fiber direction, you seeing the numbers go up and how strong it is in either direction is, quite valuable, because you remembered that test rather than the notes. You remember the applications of it, which is more important in engineering, is applying that knowledge to improve things, to better things. Yeah. And so I think specifically the course at the University of Sheffield, there is really heavy emphasis on that, the application of your theory, which is amazing. And, it keeps you hands-on, it keeps you interested, it keeps you in the labs to build up those skills and confidence, which is really nice. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. I wanted to change just tack ever so slightly and talk about actually sort of applying to university and thinking about that. Annabelle, if we, I just want to return to something you said earlier, because you mentioned the foundation year and that in fact your degree program was 5 years rather than 4. I wondered if you could just tell us a bit about what the foundation year is and why you applied for foundation year. And
so the foundation year at the University of Sheffield is for students who haven't taken the correct A-levels to go into STEM, so they might have changed their mind throughout A-levels, or you don't get the grades to go on to the undergraduate course, which was in my case, I didn't get the grades. So the foundation year is there to help those students to get to a stage where they can go into the undergraduate course, whether that be they actually take physics as an sort of an A level, or like me, build up confidence, build up that knowledge to then progress. So for me, it was really advantageous because I was able to get used to university, how it worked, but also, fill those gaps in my knowledge. And then by the time I got to the undergraduate course, I was, sailing ahead, So I think I'd really encourage students who might not have taken those correct A levels for STEM to look into it a bit more. Yeah. See if the opportunities are there, because you aren't at a disadvantage if you haven't taken maths. Yeah. You can still learn. That's what university is there for. You're constantly learning. And if STEM really, sort of pops out to you whilst you're doing your A levels, go for it. Yeah. Like, there's no regret in trying.
Yeah. I have always, when I've talked to people about applications, my advice is normally follow the things that you enjoy, because even if it's not necessarily the thing you're best at the moment, if you enjoy it, then you will work harder at it. You will naturally put in that effort. And so normally, even if at that moment in time you might be better at, something else, if it doesn't interest you as much, that's going to fall away. Whereas the thing that you love will become the thing that you're best at, because you spend time doing it. So
completely agree. That's exactly what I tell my kids all the time. You can choose to do the things that might tick all of the boxes to go to the university that you might want to go to because it's got the best nightlife, that kind of. But essentially, if you're living a life that you don't enjoy, then you won't be happy. And so, live the life that you want to live, doing the things you want to do, and enjoy it, and that's a lot of the time when as teachers we're lucky to see pupils who we've taught over the years, and they've come back and they've said, this is what I'm doing, and it's fascinating to learn that pupils that we saw lower down in the school who were interested in the stars are now doing astrophysics, and you just think that's amazing. So I completely agree with that.
And in terms then, Beverly, of applications to university and things, a lot the schools and teachers give a lot of advice to students and try and help and support students through that process and advise them. But I think particularly with things like material science, which are, as I say, more minority subjects, it can sometimes be very difficult for teachers and schools to help advise students towards those degrees, not just materials, but any of those degrees which are perhaps, have smaller numbers associated with them. How do you find, the process of supporting students towards, A level in general, but particularly guiding them potentially towards minority subjects?
So it's really important throughout their journey, as early as we can, really, getting them to understand the careers aspect, but also getting them to understand those skills related to a career. So, for example, in design technology, we focus a lot on investigation and analysis. And so with that as a focus, as opposed to the subject, that then can broaden things up for them. So we've just done a huge careers fair at the school, and we've welcomed lots of people in. And that's been fantastic for we've opened it up for year 10 and above this year. But, a few years ago, I started off this thing called STEM Fest. So we have this once a year at my school, and I organise for local schools in the area to come by for the afternoon from year 5 onwards, and to take part in workshops and activities and explore and do lots of different things within the school, but also have that careers aspect to it as well. So we encourage anyone who wants, so particularly, so we've had a conversation, haven't we, about getting universities in to talk to students about those kind of niche areas, I suppose. I've also found that doing competitions have been useful. So last year before, we had a couple of girls who were interested in the UK Water Prize, Junior Water Prize, which was a national competition, but it then went into a worldwide competition. And it got these 2 girls who were sailors over to our local reservoir and collecting water and finding out what was going on in the water in the reservoir, and then talking to their science teachers about that. So it was a competition that allowed those particular girls to talk to not only design technologists, but to scientists, to the people over at the reservoir, the sailing department, to communicate with lots of people about that. So that, again, another skill that's been really good. And every year we do we encourage students in year 11 to do the Art Craft Engineering Scholarship. I take a lead on that, and I speak to these individuals about what it is that they want to do later down the line, and it's, again, their opportunity to have support in finding out what it is that they want to be doing, really, rather than what is going to tick the right box. And it's a prestigious scholarship, and so even if they don't get that particular scholarship, the process of them looking into things is just as valuable, I've found over the years. So that's really been supportive. So there are lots of things that schools can do. I would highly encourage them to be in contact with departments like yourselves to get them to come into school. And the conversation we had last week was, can you bring something along that can kind of inspire them? So it's such a simple thing to do, but it works both ends, doesn't it? It's it helps you guys out and it helps us out. So really, we really would encourage that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think these sorts of opportunities to see something else, to talk to people, and as you say, to discover where your passions may want to go and help you, ultimately work out that chain of events that needs to happen to get you there. But as you say, I think one message that I would give to potential students out there is, if you see these opportunities, do seize them. If you see, a talk or one of the scholarships or something that you mentioned, and you think, I might be curious, investigate it, try it out, and if it's not right, then do something else. But, explore, be curious, search and expand those horizons. I'm aware that we're going to have to finish off our conversation, because Beverly has very kindly joined us in the middle of the school day between lessons. So it's fitting us in. So we're going to have to finish there. But Beverly, just before we finish, is there anything else that you'd like to say, anything you'd like our listeners to know, or anything that you wish you'd known before on sort of your journey through STEM and material science?
I mean, I would echo exactly what you've just said. Just be curious, look at what is out there. There's so much more than just the bog standard things that will tick the right box at that time, but definitely look out there and investigate, be curious. That's my lasting word, I think. Curiosity is the key. But thank you very much for having me today. I'm sorry I can't speak for longer. I've got year 11s probably queuing up outside my door at the moment, waiting to get into the workshop and play around with their NEA. So it's been an absolute pleasure this morning. Thank you very much.
It's been absolutely wonderful, and thank you for joining us. So, Annabelle, have you got any last final comments or thoughts, or, as I say, anything you wish you'd known when you were, at school applying or anything?
Well, just like you two said, take every opportunity that's given to you, and don't be afraid of asking questions, because it's those questions that can lead you down the rabbit hole of, material science and engineering. So go for it, I guess.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been fantastic to have you both here today and talk a bit about material science, and particularly thinking about material science at school and how you might make the transition between material science at school and university. So for now, let me thank Beverly once again for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And let me thank Annabelle as well for joining us this afternoon in the middle of her exams as well. So thank you, Annabelle. And finally, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for joining us, as always, on this journey. And please do tune in for our next episode coming very soon. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to join the conversation, you can find us on Instagram at Materials Unlocked. If you want to find out more about the topics that we've covered and the work that we do, a link can be found to our website in the show notes. Our thanks to the Advanced Metallic Systems CDT, the Henry Royce Institute, and the Department of Material Science at the University of Sheffield. See you next time.